Invest Africa, proudly brought to you by KPMG.
Hello and welcome to Invest Africa. I'm Kukuletu Mfupi. While Africa's mobile telecommunications industry has evolved over the years, mobile phones have very quickly become one of the most valued possessions for many Africans. According to tax and advisory firm KPMG, the continent presents a massive consumer market when compared with the slowdown in subscriber growth in the rest of the world, with at least 500 million potential mobile subscribers. Pilani Nyalunga filed this report.
In Africa, connecting to the internet is done more often than not via a mobile phone. This means that mobile operators need to get more access to wireless spectrums. But what is a wireless spectrum? Well, the TV broadcasts we watch, the radio programs we listen to, and the mobile phone service we use are all done via airwaves. This data transmitted through the air is called a wireless spectrum. Fixed-line operators like South Africa's Neotel have access to a huge chunk of the wireless spectrum. So, naturally, mobile operators are looking to the fixed-line space in order to service the increased demand. In South Africa, the Vodacom Neotel deal is an example of just that. Neotel has access to a 800 MHz spectrum in a band currently used for television broadcasts. It's for this reason that Vodacom recently agreed to take over Neotel for about 7 billion rands.
What underpins the mobile network is fixed services. You have got fixed network that connects all our base stations where you get your mobile services, be it voice or data. That network hangs over a fixed network. With the growth of data services and increase in volumes of minutes that people use, you need to invest a lot more in the underlying infrastructure, underlying fiber. That's why we invested in our own fiber since 2008. So the Neotel acquisition, therefore, helps us accelerate our capacity that underpins our network. But also, importantly, it helps us to get fiber to the business, closer to the business, fiber closer to the home. Vodacom has got about 6,000 kilometers of fiber today. If you take the 15,000 kilometers of Neotel and add to that, you start having a bigger portfolio to be able to improve capacity to carry data traffic, but also bring fiber closer to the home and closer to the business.
But, as is the case across the continent, regulatory bodies are accused of slowing such deals.
I think there are enough structures in place where the government will, and they'll be able to assess as the Commission, what's the right thing for South Africa. Is there going to be more competition? The answer is yes. Will there be more investments? The answer is yes. Will this be the right thing for South Africa? Our view is yes. But as we look at that, consolidation is happening, right? Whether we look at Telkom and BCX and Telkom and MTN and Neotel and Vodacom, it's all a matter of how do businesses start getting scale by being able to take advantage of the infrastructures they have and provide customers, which is the key point here, customers with the services they want and for what they can afford and pay for. But not all will be standard. There will be innovative services.
As more consumers buy smartphones and tablets, which can use about 120 times more data than a traditional cell phone, there is a much greater need for larger wireless spectrum. Pilani Nyalunga, CNBC Africa, Johannesburg.
Well, joining me now in studio to discuss the evolution of telecommunications industry, in particular with a key focus on mobile operators, we have in our Johannesburg studios Peter Fakada. He's the MTN Group Chief Commercial Officer, Nikki Manya, Chief Executive and Founder of Rural Brands, and joining us from our Lagos studios is Joseph Tegbe, partner at KPMG, and Demola Eleso, Chief Executive of Capcom. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us today. Hopefully we will have a very lively discussion touching on a passion on each of yours. I'd like to start off with you, Peter. You are a well-known businessman who's served across various continents and have managed to witness the evolution that mobile telecommunications has brought to the globe. From your perspective, are we on track with what was initially planned a few years ago, or is this surprising you almost every day?
Well, the nice thing about mobile is it surprises us every day, so we're never on track. We're always far ahead or a little bit behind, as it changes so quickly. But I mean, I believe there's still much more to come. as long as we start looking at a bigger picture of what it can mean for a country rather than dividing the pie, which happens a lot at the moment.
Timon, I'd like to cross to you in Lagos just to get your perspective. I'm sure you've been able to witness the economic and social impact as well that mobile telecommunications has brought to a country like Nigeria.
Yes, it's been tremendous here. Since 2001 till now, the industry has been a transformation engine for the Nigerian economy and even massive societal changes, and we're glad of it. And of course, we're looking forward to the next generation of transformation that is upon us in the industry.
Well, transformation is something that is certainly needed, and it does seem as though it's opened up the door for you, Nikki. It's opened up opportunities for you to start up your own company, Rural Brands, not to be associated with the title, I think, after having a look at your website. He does exciting stuff. Maybe MTN might want to get in on that. But the doors that mobile telecommunications has opened up for you.
Yeah, basically it just allows us the opportunity to be able to innovate a little bit. Before, when I started in IT, it was back in 1998, and the internet in South Africa was still a new thing. It was phenomenal, but you had to be either on a PC at work to use that. You couldn't have it at home. So now you have actually the internet in your fingertips, and you're able to do, I think, 75% of my activities, I do them on mobile. I never really go back to a desk. I'm always on the road, so I'm able to get my emails, do my conversations, do WhatsApp, email, whatever it is that I can do to communicate with the next person. I mostly do it on mobile, and that has really helped. The telecommunication companies have helped in making sure that we have that access, actually.
Now, one thing that probably makes this possible is infrastructure, and we've seen a lot of infrastructure being rolled out with the cables. We've got Easy and CCOM, but more importantly, Joseph, you've got the numbers from KPMG. I'm sure you can perhaps give us more perspective as to, from an infrastructure perspective, who is leading on the continent when it comes to mobile telephony?
Thank you very much. I think across the continent today, I think MTN, from a mobile point of view, it has significant investment, and the investment, and they are the lead in Nigeria. They've done a lot of investment in infrastructure. Beyond that, I think we also have the Bati Group, which is also rolling out a lot of infrastructure across the continent, and then the Etisalat Group rolling out infrastructure. But like you rightly said, what you find out is the numbers are growing, and to be honest, it's surpassing expectations. The projection has it that by 2015, there's a forecast that we might be reaching as high as over 1 billion subscribers in Africa. That's a projection. In Nigeria, we have about 85% teledensity in Nigeria today, and we're actually looking beyond voice telephoning, and we're looking at the big data. And I think the next challenge for us, which also puts a lot of challenge on infrastructure, it's broadband. And that's the next frontier that we need to deal with in Africa.
The next frontier obviously must come with its challenges, and we've got Mr. MTN with us in studio himself. I just want to touch on some of the milestones that you've managed to achieve. You're the number one mobile operator on the continent. You've got other operations as well across the globe which are performing exceptionally well, and you were the first mobile operator to bring LTE to South Africa, which is fast known as 4G technology, faster internet speeds from a mobile perspective. But I'm sure the infrastructure also does pose certain backlogs from what you've experienced on the continent.
Yes, it does. I mean, wherever we get sufficient spectrum and licenses, we can roll out, and we can enable people like Nicky to work from wherever he is. Wherever we don't, I mean, we can go as far as 3G, which is also pretty fast, but technology goes very, very quick. And, as MTN, we invest a lot in our infrastructure. That's the core of our service, and other people can benefit from that. But we need to get the space to do that.
The space to do it, you mentioned the regulatory environment. Where are you meeting challenges on the continent?
Well, there's some markets like in West Africa where the LTE license have been given to smaller operators, and they're struggling to roll out because, whether we like it or not, telecom is a volume business, and if you don't have the money to invest in volume, you won't get the business. And that might be insignificant in a small perspective, but the biggest challenge is that if we don't roll out internet across our continent, you will not enable people like Nikki to find new services. And what we've seen, the new businesses all coming from garage businesses, small entrepreneurs who start somewhere small and make a big business. I mean, WhatsApp started in a garage.
Demola, let's get your perspective on this. You heard Peter's concerns that spectrum is often given to the smaller players. Your voice, if you can add it to this discussion, is it a volumes game?
Oh, definitely. I think volume is important, but we also have to be careful that if we rely too much on the volume players, we end up with dominance. And the danger with dominance is that you can end up with a sort of monopoly type behavior or duopolies, and that ultimately is not good for the consumers. So I think the regulator has got a delicate balance to achieve between making sure that the volume players who've got the muscle to roll out large-scale infrastructure in large countries and the financial or capital challenges can make progress. But there also has to be space for the disruptive players to come in, challenge the market, challenge the either near dominant players or the big guys, so that at the end of the day the consumer can benefit from all facets of what technology and service offerings are available.
Nick, I'd like to
you know, our charter at Capcom is to introduce some disruption into the atmosphere or into the telecommunications industry, so that we can achieve a two-tier progress.
Nikki, I'd like to bring your voice into this conversation. You heard from Capcom, as well as Peter mentioning that from a regulatory perspective, it does seem as though certain countries are blossoming. But from a South African perspective, we had the issues with the MTR cuts. But many people do say that the regulator in South Africa almost seems like a toothless dog, with a lot of bark and no bite. I know you're not from ICAS. I know you don't follow them too closely, but I'm sure you can give us your perspective as to how you view the situation from the continent.
Okay, the last time when those MTR happens, I was hoping that everything happens. I was hoping that the prices would go down, but they did in the market, let's be honest, they did, and I realized, not to blow MTN's horn now, they cut some prices a couple of weeks ago, and it brought some serious competition in, and I've always been in partnership with AfriHost, who is one of their little chickens that they picked up along the way. So AfriHost, what they've done, they brought in a new way of bringing mobile services to us as individuals. And the way they come about is they always go into right there at the bottom of the market, and they just cut the price down. And what we've seen in South Africa, we've got Telkom and New Tel, we've got Vodacom as well as MTN. The competition has been there. Yes, we, the smaller guys, all what we're looking for, make it cheap, make it fast, make it available. And then we can come in and innovate the things that we've done. But at the same time, regulatory hurdles are there. You sometimes don't know. We had the Minister of Communication changing so many times. Now the department has been changed into 2 departments, but the difficulty is that we, the smaller guys, we sit down and say, let's see. We're not waiting for bigger brother to do something. We just say, make it work for us, and we'll come in there and do the things. We always emulate sort of the likes of Kenya and Silicon Valley in the US, how they made it easy for everybody to access. And out of that, you see how many companies come out. We have a youth unemployment challenge. We work in the space where youth enjoys being in. ICT is cool in South Africa at the current moment. In the world, it's cool, actually. We sort of do cooler gadgets. We build websites, we build internet, we build mobile apps. With that, if you allow us the space, we're able to get a lot of these young guys off the street, put them into little rooms, put them in little garages, and then we can innovate. But at the same time, our voice is not big enough to be able to say, big brother, please just ease off on the cost a little bit.
Well, you've got one of them sitting next to you, and he seems pretty impressed with what you've managed to throw out there. But what sticks out for me, Nikki, is make it fast, make it cheap, make it available. And Joseph, maybe this is where you can come in here. Nikki alluded to countries like Kenya, as well as who emulate the US, perhaps, in making telecommunications fast, easy, and available. What key things have they managed to bring to the market that perhaps the rest of us on the continent can learn from?
I think the Kenyan regulator is one of the frontline regulators in Africa. And when you look at what the kind of things that the Kenyan regulator has done, they've been able to actually regulate competition properly. They've been able to sanction where it's required to be sanctioned. Beyond that, I think one of the things that Kenya has also been able to do as a regulator, it's beyond just sanctioning. They've been able to create an enabling environment to allow both large-scale players and small players to actually operate. And that is what Nigeria is trying to emulate. And when you look at the kind of thing that NCC in Nigeria is trying to do, it's if you keep allowing, just to take off to what Demola said, if you allow big players to take charge of the industry end to end, what you typically will have, you have the small players being flushed out. So what you try to do as much as possible is have the industry, the sector stratified in a manner that you can have the small players operate at some tier in the sector where there can be adequate handshake with properly regulated pricing in terms of transfer pricing between the big operators and the small operators. And we're seeing that in Nigeria, and we're going to see that unfold with the infrastructure companies that are going to be rolled out in Nigeria, with the RSPs and the ISPs that are being rolled out of Nigeria, and the 2.3 gigahertz licenses that have just been awarded also allows, some level of moderation of the vertically integrated operators who actually control this sector hand to hand. So also for effective competition, you actually require that in the industry.
Increased competition. Well, we will delve into that a little later after this short ad break. But when we come back, we continue looking at M&A activity, in particular with regard to small players taking place in the mobile telecommunication sphere here on the continent. See you in the next 2 minutes. Africa at abn360.com, or interact with us on Twitter through @CNBC Africa using the hashtag InvestAfrica. Well, I'm still with my guests in Johannesburg in our studios. There's Peter Fakada, he's the MTN Group Chief Commercial Officer, Nikki Manya, Chief Executive and Founder of Rural Brands, and joining us from our Lagos studios is Joseph Tegbe, he's a partner at KPMG, as well as Demola Aleso, he's the Chief Executive of Capcom in Nigeria. Gentlemen, to follow up on a discussion that we were focusing on before the ad break, it's the smaller players. But how do you link this up with the amount of M&A activity and consolidation that's also been taking place in the mobile sphere? And maybe from a South African perspective, it's MTN and AfriHost. We've got Vodacom and Neotel. There's so much activity going on, Telkom and BCX as well. But from your perspective, big brother from MTN, Peter, is there room for the smaller players, and how much support should they be getting?
Well, I mean, let's take another perspective. Let's look at around the world, America, Europe. We had 5, 6 operators per country. Now it's all moving back to 2 or 3 operators per country. Sheer reason is that we can't keep up the capex or the investments to keep on rolling out the network. So there's certainly room for smaller players. There's a lot of innovation going on, but that's at different places in the market. There's a lot of messaging players come up who are using our network, but in a very different way than trying to play in the same space as operators play. And yes, we are often we're often seen as big brothers in Africa, but without big brothers, you can't grow much. You need massive investments to get infrastructure rolled out in Africa. And it's not always economically viable to roll it out in the deepest parts. You can only do it when you have enough volumes to sustain that.
Demola, I want to bring you in here because you work for Capcom, you're one of the smaller players in Nigeria. Do you echo Peter's thoughts, or perhaps are you finding more cohesiveness taking place between smaller players like yourself and the big players like MTN and Bharti?
Yeah, I think if we get the whole theory of capitalism right, the small player becomes a big player one day. Once upon a time, MTN was a small player, and they have grown to become a big player or bigger player because the enabling environment allowed them to flourish. So it is instructive that now the big player doesn't want to see small players around the pond. But I understand it, and I think that they're correct to defend that position. But likewise, we, the small players, trying to introduce new dimensions and new facets into the sector for the consumers in particular, we have a job to do, and we will be out there fighting for our space to help create value for the consumer. And that's our charter. So for example, Capcom is trying to deliver what I call WBB, wireless broadband services in the Nigerian environment, because quite clearly the big players have failed with the quality of service that they're delivering on voice and, to a certain extent, data services in Nigeria, to the point that the consumer is up in arms, the regulator has resorted to fining and sanctioning them, and we, the smaller players, represent an outlet to help consumers understand what is a benchmark, what is a quality benchmark, what is an innovation benchmark. And I think it creates a healthy environment for the big players to perform to and for the small players to strive towards.
Joseph, to throw you into this conversation as well, interesting discussion. Peter as well as Demola having interesting views on this, but at the same time, we don't want an environment which is full of a monopoly, but also we don't want to have too many players to choose from where, you know, there will be potential loopholes in the system for South Africa, or rather African consumers. How do we strike a balance here from your observations?
Yeah, thank you very much. This is an interesting part of it. And this is the stage we are in Nigeria now, where we need to actually ensure we get it right. Now, I think one thing, I need to go back to the previous discussions we've had. Now, part of the challenge we have in Africa today is the strength. I mean, you did pass a comment on the South African regulator. There are few regulators that are seen to be very strong in Africa. The Kenyan regulator, NCC Nigeria, this seems to be, you know, the flagship in terms of regulatory space. And the issue is that you need to ensure that the regulator takes a position where the industry is segmented in a manner where there can be appropriate handshake between the small players and the big players. The big players have the deep pocket to actually invest in infrastructure. You can invest in fiber all across the continent, or all across Africa, all across Nigeria or South Africa or wherever. But the truth at the end of the day is that, to be honest, the big players do not, or, you know, interestingly, don't get interested in as much innovation as the small players do. And that's the reality. That's what we see. And the truth at the end of it is that what you see, you need the small players to actually operate at the retail level in a manner that there can be innovation and there can be services to the consumers. So again, striking the balance, and this is where the regulator actually needs to intervene. And the truth at the end of it, if the regulator is not strong enough and does not understand the dynamics of the industry enough to intervene, then we'll continue to have situations where the big boys or the big players will continue to stifle the small players. But actually, you need, in telecoms and in other developed economies, the advancement of technology, of telecoms, telecommunication services, has been out of disruptive technology and innovative technology and services. So you need the small players to actually do some of these things. And that's why if you go to Europe and you go to the US, what you're seeing is some segmentation of the sector, where people are operating as Infraco or Netco and allowing other people to operate as Safco, which is basically focusing on services. So you have your niche, and you can actually, but the regulator needs to play a very active role in ensuring that the handshake in terms of cost transfers are actually properly priced. Otherwise, you have a situation where the small players are actually thrown out of the market.
Joseph, we certainly hope that the regulators across the continent are paying attention to this discussion. But let's focus on one of the smaller brothers in the industry, and that's one of you. You have your own company where you're finding more mobile technologies, you implementing new strategies, which helps other entrepreneurs out in the continent. Are you being stifled by your big brothers sitting next to you, or are you being offered support by them?
There's something that I always like saying is that know what you know and know what you don't know. You know, I'm not going to go and dream of taking on MTN, for instance. And on the other hand, I always say to my friends, if you say you want to start anything in mining, you're stupid at this age. It's too late. You know, go and find within the mining sector maybe a service that is not there. Find something disruptive enough to get in and do something. We request the enabling environment, which is we have the government which will worry about maybe the cables, the cabling, fiber optic cables around the country. MTN is a business. Obviously, they're not going to just give you everything on a silver platter. Same as their competitors out there, they're not going to just give you everything for free. As they compete, we benefit through cost savings on the other hand. But we, as the smaller ones, we need to also be aware that, by the way, the reason why you're able to survive is because you offer a service that somebody else does not do it better than you do. So therefore, let's focus on what you do best and grow with it. The gentleman spoke about Capcom. He said they are offering wireless services in some areas around Nigeria. For instance, right now you have MTN, LTE, and 3G. If somebody else sees a gap there that says, no, I can take this to my village back home through a different way other than the way that MTN has. We spoke about AfriHost that MTN is in the process of acquiring right now. AfriHost existed, and they became alive from 2005 to this day until they became attractive to MTN. Why? Because they found a niche and said, you know what, there is this part where MTN is not servicing or is not doing it the way that it's supposed to be done. Let's do it. And they took the game right in MWeb's face. And MWeb is struggling because of that right now. They are not the #1 ISS in the country. And they took the game straight to internet solutions as well. So my point of view as a smaller player, I say, leave the bigger brother with his big plate. Find a space inside of the big pie. Take your mark, make your mark inside of there. He'll recognize you one day. They recognize AfriHost. Obviously, they'll recognize somebody else if you do it right and if you find your niche. If you're going to go and try and find the bigger brother, the problem is, as Peter said, the infrastructure cost, the capex is just too much. No investor is going to look at you and say, let's try it. Because at the end of the day, they're not going to allow you because the competition is just going to be too stifling.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I'm happy that we are leaving this conversation on a note regarding innovation. Very quickly, we've got about 10 seconds before we go off air. Your outlook from an innovation perspective, are we reaching our full potential on a scale of 1 to 10?
I would say we're about, in South Africa, about 6. The prices are still high. I still would like to see a bit better speeds.
Well, Big Brother's sitting next to you. Hopefully he hears that. But your assessment, scale of 1 to 10, innovation, how's the continent performing?
About a 4, I'd say. I think we can do much more. There's so much opportunity which we're leaving on the table because we are not focusing on the right things. It's like Nicky says, as long as you focus on the consumer segment, there's mass opportunity.
Dimola, your perspective, naturally you are shaking up the game in Nigeria, but on a scale of 1 to 10, from an innovation perspective, how are we faring?
I join MTN perspective there. I'd score it at a 4.
Big brother and small brother coming together there. See what happens?
It's all in the family.
It's all in the family, that's correct. Joseph, your closing comments on a scale of 1 to 10, how far are we from reaching our full potential?
I think I'll join everybody. I think it's 4. We're not doing as well as we should be doing. The challenges are there, infrastructural challenges are there, and then the truth at the end of the day is, like I said earlier on, the regulators need to up their game and actually empower and create an environment where the small players can get more disruptive and more innovative.
I tell you what, next time we'll make sure that we get the regulators from across the continent to join in on this discussion. But that's where we leave it for today. We've come to an end of this episode of Invest Africa. Thank you so much to all of my guests for joining us, both in Johannesburg as well as in Nigeria. But do stay tuned, because Bruce Whitfield is up next as he unpacks the latest news from South Africa's economy on Tonight with Bruce. But until next time, it's goodbye. Thank you for joining us.